Hello everyone, I'm in the Yahoo Esports studio today, and joining me remotely from Australia is Fasffy. How's it going, Fasffy?
I'm doing okay, thanks. How are you?
Very good. Well, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about all this conversation that's been happening around the Tainted Minds ruling and sort of your side of that whole situation, because it seems like obviously there's a lot of conversation and it's a very controversial topic, I guess, right now. Maybe we can kind of just start off with you telling me, you know, what your relationship was with the team and sort of how things developed over time, because obviously there's been twit-longers that have come out and all this kind of stuff, but I think for people who aren't familiar with the situation, you can give us kind of like a bridge version of how all these things went down.
Okay, where to start? Gee. Basically at the end of the finals last year, I sat down with Nick Bobbier and we were discussing like next year's plans and that kind of thing. And he was just like, yeah, I really like the way League is going. I've enjoyed this split and I really want to, make sure that we have a good run next split and I want to win and, these kind of things. So from that moment on, I started looking into like what was possible with the team because we were facing a bit of like issues with the current roster at that point in time anyway. So essentially I had to look at basically reforming the roster. And to do this, obviously I had to make like preparations that were like, I guess, not seen as normal for our region because we were looking at importing players. So, players and coach, so Enero and Cake and Ryan. Basically that went forward with me, like giving a rough timeline of like how I would like to like go forward. So I said roughly I wanted, everybody in the house by like start November, at latest end November. And basically from there, I tried to get people like signed so that they had enough time to fly over and move over. We had to do trials still. So basically what we did was like myself and Enero, we filled the roster with the international players and then filled around them with the Oceanic players. So yeah, we obviously needed to, first of all, get them signed, which they would not do if we didn't have a house, which is, I think, fair. So basically there was a lot of like preparations that had to happen, and Tainted Minds already started to miss deadlines that I had given. So I ended up trying to be like, well, crap, like all of my work's about to go out the window because I'd already been discussing things with players from like the international regions and stuff like that. And so I basically started to step up, I guess, and was like, how can I help out? Like, we need to have this done. Like, these are the deadlines and, we're going to miss them if we don't, get so-and-so done. So I started like getting listings for houses and asking my friends to, because I was on the Gold Coast and the house was looking to be in Sydney. So obviously I couldn't go to the inspections and a lot of the other people were in Brisbane as well. So they can do the inspections. So I had to get friends to go and like video record the inspections of the houses and that kind of thing as well. So it was just like a lot of pre-planning that I ended up having to do myself because Tainted Minds weren't taking meeting deadlines. So that's where you saw like a lot of pressure from my end through the conversations with them before signing the team. But yeah, so at the end, I think the guys flew over at the very end of November and they were in the house by the first week of December. And so we were already a month down within the timeline. So we only had December to do trials and then have them settle into the house before starting like proper practice in January before the split started towards the end of January. So that's a little bit of the timeline and where stuff obviously started to go wrong, I guess, is where you can look for it.
Sure. So obviously then you start to sort of see things go a little wrong. Was there any part of you at that time that felt like, okay, maybe this seems a little unstable? Like if you were having concerns or doubts about their ability to sort of function on these timelines, did any part of you feel like maybe it's time to just kind of back out? Or, because it did seem like everything continued on, right?
Yeah, no, it didn't at that point because, up until then, I'd only had like a little bit of communication with them over the internet because back then everything was still done at home. So we didn't actually have team houses until this year. So everything was done online, like organising scrims, practice with people. The players played from their homes. So players played from New Zealand, players played from Australia. So it was all kind of done online. So in terms of like pulling things together in person and like for real, I guess, I never got to see any of that from the Tainted Mind side until we actually moved into the house. And they're really big on talking. So, it's not uncommon within esports for people to be very, forthcoming with what they say and be good talkers, I guess, and then not to follow through.
Yeah.
But I just didn't believe that, it was in their best intentions. The conversation that I had with Nick and everything was just like, okay, this is what he wants. This is what we're going to do. And
sure.
Yeah.
So then you guys get into the house, and maybe you can, again, sort of summarize how things went from that point on.
Yeah, okay, so coming into the house, we actually had, we did this as a team. So with Tainted Minds upper management, Tristan, Ryan, and Enero, we were in a Skype call, and we were going through houses that were, narrowed down. So we ended up with a selection of 3 houses to pick from. And we actually originally wanted to pick a different house than the one we ended up moving in as a team. So unfortunately, the management was knocked back when they were applying for the place because the owners didn't want 6 males living in the house, essentially.
Sure.
So that house kind of got knocked off the table. And then there was 2 houses left. So one of them was available immediately, and the other one was available towards the end of December, which, as I explained, was not within the timeline that we had. So we decided to go forward with the understanding that this was a temporary house, that it was only secured for 6 months, and that they would look for another house, that would give them 6 months to look for a new house that we could then move into after this.
Sure.
So from going into the house, we kind of already knew that it was only a temporary thing. It was just for split 1. But yeah, so I guess that's how we ended up with the house that we did. And yeah.
And then you move in, and there are issues with the house and with computers and internet and all that stuff, I guess.
Yeah, I'm reading a lot at the moment with Reddit about how they're saying, that it was a rented property and you have to get permission from the landlord to do things and this and that, which is, fair to a degree. But I notified Tainted Minds within the week that we moved in of all of the issues that we were having. And, come end of February, they're still there. I don't think it takes 3 months to get a landlord to respond.
Right.
That, and I know that they got confirmation from the landlord that they were allowed to put air conditioning in. It was at their own expense. Doors was the same thing. Doors could go in, at their own expense. I know that this happened. Tainted Minds chose not to do those things because with the air conditioning, they didn't think it was going to be too pricey, is what they thought.
Yeah. So maybe, again, for those that don't know, what were all the issues that you had once you moved into the house and that the team experienced and all that?
It was actually an ordeal of experiences with the house. So when we moved in at first, the showers worked for maybe a few days, and we lost hot water. So then we had to wait about a week for the hot water to be repaired because they actually had this really I don't know, he was, I guess, the dodgiest handyman you could have to come over. That was what the guy had. But yeah, so it took a week for the hot water to get fixed, and then by that time he finally fixed it, and then within a few days, one of the showers broke. We had 2 bathrooms for the 7 of us in the house. So we ended up having to use 1 shower for the next 2 weeks as well. We had to wait 5 weeks to get any kind of air conditioning within the house as well. And this is during an Australian summer. And it was record breaking heat waves this year. Multiple times we reached 40 degrees. Yeah, so there was the heat issues. We moved in and the rooms didn't have curtains that blocked out light. So there was a problem that the players were practicing for long hours and then going to sleep and waking up at the crack of dawn because there was sun streaming into their rooms, and then it was hot as well on top of that. So there was a whole lot of issues that were backing up from this place. The immediate issue that we noticed as well when we moved in was that the place wasn't cleaned before we were able to move in. So the place was actually filthy, and I had to go and try and find cleaners to do it all myself, which I did. So if I didn't do that, Tainted Minds wouldn't have done that.
Right.
On top of that as well, the contract stated a fully furnished house, which it was not. We got there and we find out from upper management that the players were expected to bring their own towels. This wasn't communicated at all prior to moving in either. These players flew from overseas with no expectation of having expectation to bring a towel.
Right.
I had to ask for a dinner table. It's just a huge, huge, huge list of stuff that just stacked up. By the time we finally got air conditioning in the house and the power started tripping. So it wasn't like blackouts for the area or anything. It was just our house that kept tripping. And it was a certain set of circuits. So I couldn't cook when it came time to cook because they needed all the power so that they could scrim or use the air conditioning, or, we couldn't use the air conditioning because it was just so much.
So at what point did you start to make Riot aware of all these issues? Because it seemed like obviously a very uncomfortable living situation and pretty untenable. At what point in time did you start to make Riot aware that, it felt like things were not being properly supplied to the team?
Yeah, okay. So after about 2 or 3 weeks of this happening, I tried to work with the organization, or we all did, I guess, essentially. Like the players had to sit through it as well. But essentially since we moved in. So I told you the first week that I emailed them, and so I was looking to give them the 30 days within contracts to resolve breaches. So I didn't actually reach out with like the direct contact to Riot saying, look, we need help, please step in, until it was, I guess, the very start of January, because there was like the end of the year, which was like Christmas and New Year's. So I decided to, one
Right.
month, and then I contacted Riot. But during like the end of that month, they were receiving emails from me which had questionable like questions in it that would have like rang bells to them. So yeah, but like when I emailed them at the start of January, it was actually like I got the response from Riot that they couldn't help me at all with anything, and if I emailed in with these issues to Riot, they couldn't do anything about it. It had to come from a player. It couldn't even come from our coach. So essentially, when I emailed in the first week of January, we were kind of knocked back, and it was like, well, if the players aren't going to email in about these issues, that's not our problem.
Sure. Why? Yeah. What reason did they give for not recognizing you as somebody who could advocate on behalf of the players?
You know what? I didn't ask.
Yeah. And so then obviously you started to have the player, like they're saying that they need to hear this from the players. Did you go and talk to the players at all about the stuff, or have the players reach out to Riot?
Yep. Well, this whole time, communication between the players and everybody within the house was fairly strong. It was just when I would notify Tainted Minds upper management about things, that we would be sitting there waiting for days, if not weeks, for them to do anything. So everybody kind of knew the situation, and initially, I guess they were reluctant to email in because I guess, they'd been feeling pretty bad for a month about, a built-up of like, oh my God, I'm a burden, or oh my God, because this is like the way that I guess Tainted Minds upper management made them feel with the lack of response and the lack of care already for the past month. So yeah, there was a little bit of like hesitation, and so because I emailed in first, and then the coach emailed in, and then after that the players emailed in. So we tried everything that we could before the players had to actually step in and take time away from their practice and that kind of thing. Yeah.
At any point in time, so once Riot failed to recognize you as somebody who could advocate on behalf of the team, was there any point in time where they started to start listening to you or take input from you, or did they pretty much? I just assume that if they were unwilling to talk to you about the stuff and only the players, it probably just became them talking directly to the players, and you weren't really able to get involved, right?
Yep, that's essentially how it went down.
Yeah.
All the communication had to go through the players, and I was kind of like shut out, I guess. Even though I was supporting them from the back end in the house whenever they had to send in emails, like helping them formulate them, get the information that they needed, and that kind of thing. In terms of me actually directly having contact with Riot, no.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe you can help me move along the timeline here. So at the start of January, I think you said you started to reach out to Riot. Then there was a delay while it took a while for the players to kind of feel like comfortable talking to Riot. Around what time did they start talking to Riot?
Probably the second week, if not the end of the second week.
Okay. And what were the responses from Riot? Did they say they were going to reach out to Tainted Minds, or how did things progress from there?
They asked for a copy of their contracts. They asked for an email stating all of the problems. They asked for an email that just included the problems they faced and what they think, what reasons they think their contracts have been violated. Because at this point we had the coach, Nick, had asked for his buyout within it was already over 30 days, and Tainted Minds had failed to provide him with his buyout. So at this point, we already knew that they were breaching multiple contracts. I didn't have a computer. Nick didn't have a computer. So yeah, Riot were essentially saying, well, you know, try and explain to us why you think your contract has been breached. We'll investigate it to see if it has been or not, and we'll go from there. So all the players emailed in, yeah, their contracts, which I thought was a bit stupid because they should already have the contracts of the players. So It was a lot of doubling up of information. And the players faced this again, like later down the line with Riot, where, you know, Ringland asked for all of the exact information that players had sent in an email prior.
At that point in the early phase in January, did you and the players have much confidence that Riot would be able to assist you guys and make the situation better on a reasonable timeline?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. We thought that, you know, once we emailed into Riot and started having contact with Riot, it would be resolved very quickly, because we were at that point in time worrying about making it to, you know, the split start, so that we could actually just fully concentrate on the split, because we were already missing out on a lot of practice that we had planned anyway. We wanted January to be like the practice time, to start learning to mesh as a team and everything, because December we finalized the roster. So yeah, we were essentially just worried about not having things in place for the split starting. So our timelines were already pushed back, and we'd like just moved forward to hoping that that would be the case, and that, you know, Riot stepping in the first or the second week of January would help that. So essentially there would be like 2 weeks. I guess we're hoping that things would be resolved.
Yeah. At what point in time did things start to go really bad? Because I know I started to hear, just kind of on the sidelines, you know, the players were starting to want to leave, and that contract database was still showing them involved in all this stuff. Maybe you can kind of advance me to that point in the timeline.
Okay, so that goes to about week 4 of the OPL. So at this stage, they'd already played 3 weeks in the OPL. Well, I guess 2 weeks into the OPL, and stuff was not getting resolved at all. We were still, so this is like a month down, we were still facing the issue with Tainted Minds, where they were saying that things were resolved, whereas they weren't. And Riot were just essentially taking that off face value and not investigating it to say, you know, like we actually had to walk back in and be like, no, these things haven't been fixed. And Riot would go, oh, okay. And at that point, like that's where I think it was starting to get really bad. Players had lost faith in Riot, players had lost faith in Tainted Minds, and
what timeline on the actual calendar, for those that aren't familiar with the OPL schedule? You said week 4. What month or week is that of the year?
Around February. Okay. First, second week of February.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so then that started to happen, and things started to really fall apart. Right? Actually, you said had thought that a lot of this stuff had been resolved when it hadn't.
Yeah. So obviously they were communicating with Tainted Minds somehow behind the scenes, where we weren't like involved. But yeah. So obviously they went to speak to Tainted Minds. Tainted Minds would be like, "Yep, sweet, it's resolved," and then Riot, I guess, would just believe them and not investigate or ask the players to follow up with us if, you know, things had actually been resolved.
Yeah. All right, so talk to me a little bit about how the players wanting to leave the organization was handled, and, you know, them trying to get out of their contracts, and how that all happened with the Riot contract database, etc.
Okay. So at this point in time, like the coach, Nick, he'd already actually said to the owner of Tainted Minds that, you know, the contract is void. I'm no longer with your org, and I'm leaving, and that was it. So Nick made his announcement that he was a free agent, and looking to like find maybe another team. But at that point in time, like we all just wanted to play as a team together. So Nick was still kind of on the sidelines just to help the players and myself out. So he stuck around a little bit in essence for that, but he had essentially told the owners of Tainted Minds that, you know, the contract's void. They didn't hold up their end of the bargain. And yeah, so, but like they didn't challenge him at that point, which was really bizarre, because later down the track, they refused to release him from the database anyway. So they like accepted it when he first said that, you know, our contract's void, and then they went back on that later as well. So yeah, but the players getting stuck in the global database comes from the fact that, you know, Tainted Minds refused to honor their termination within their contract. So I guess like we had Riot mediation, and then a week after we had that same instance where, you know, Riot had assumed that things had been resolved, and, you know, Tainted Minds was telling us that they were resolved to our faces as a team, to the players and myself and Nick, and us going, no, that is not fixed. So essentially after that, we went back into Riot again as a team one last time, and we sat down there and said, what are our options? Like, this is not happening. We're giving them time. We've tried things with you. What are our options? And Riot kind of just sat there and went, we can't give you any legal advice based off your contract. You need to seek legal aid. And that was essentially the only thing they could tell us.
What's strange about that is I guess I don't understand. So at this point in time, it was clear that at least in your interpretation, the player's interpretation of the contract, that the contract should have been void because they'd been breached for over 30 days, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, at that point, it'd be 2 months.
Okay.
Like, we still had issues in the house. We didn't have stable internet. We couldn't practice. Essentially, they could not practice still.
And given that, at the very least, did Riot say they did not consider the contracts in breach, or
Yes.
Oh, they said that they didn't consider that they had been in breach?
Yep. So they said that as a response after the players sent in their email with their contracts and what they thought was breach within the contract that they had, and they sent back saying, you know, no, there's no black and white in here, no black and white reason that your contracts are breached. All of the, you know, areas that Tainted Minds were failing to uphold their end of the bargain was with, like, clauses within the contract that was, I guess, so, like, for example, a fully furnished house. You know, you can't list every single item, or well, every single item that was in their mind a fully furnished house, like, was not listed there. So that's where it was like a gray area. And that's where they decided to say, you know, we can't give legal advice on that.
Sure. All right. One question I have about this whole thing is, as things are going sideways, what, you know, for you personally, what made you decide to stick around with the team as all this stuff is going down?
So yeah, I was never ever provided with the computer, and my contract was in serious breach from the start. So I stuck around for, I guess, 2 months longer than I should have, and up until the point where they decided to terminate me. It was basically an unfair dismissal. But yeah, so I guess that I stuck around because, you know, this was the team that I put together. I put in a lot of work to it, and I just wanted to help the players because, like, they have come from, like, overseas to Australia. Like, I really felt that it was important that they had a good experience coming to Australia because, you know, it was always the intention to help the region grow. And I thought that getting international players into teams and recognition within the region and, you know, everything that comes with, like, winning the tournaments and competing overseas would be really good for the region. And yeah, I guess that's why I stuck around. I felt like I still had a duty of care for the players. And yeah, that's as basic as it comes down to. Yeah. Even though that Tainted Minds terminated me as their manager, I still felt a duty of care for the players that I had recruited. You know, I was the one that was negotiating everything with the people and saying, yeah, we should do this, and, you know, kind of the face value. So it was like my word that was also, I guess, breaking in the eyes of the people that I had recruited, and I didn't like that.
Unless you can think of anything else that you would like to add, I'd love to just talk specifically about these past couple of weeks of investigation from Riot. You know, we've heard information come out that the investigations were kind of odd, or at least from the players' perspective, or that they didn't really have the conversations they felt like they needed to have as part of this. Maybe you can talk to me a little bit about, from your perspective, how the investigations went down and how you feel about that.
Yeah, okay. So starting from the beginning, I guess.
Sure.
So yeah, when we contacted Riot in January, we were obviously expecting, like I said, maybe it would take 2 weeks for this to be resolved, and then we'd be literally starting the first week of OPL, and, you know, we'd still be behind, but it'd still be that we could just then still knuckle down and, like, focus on, you know, the split coming up. So at that point, yeah, it was just essentially all of our meetings and stuff that Riot had said as a, like, okay, we'll do this, we'll do that, and we'll start looking at this and looking at that, got postponed. So originally, like, Riot were going to come out the next day after one of our emails and inspect the property. And that didn't end up happening with the people that we were expecting to come. So Riot sent out a film crew that day as well. who came into the house to just film some content for, you know, the broadcast. And we heard back later that, you know, that was a tick in their box for inspecting the place. Whereas the people who came in to do the filming literally did not look at the place. So, like, we didn't see how that was, like, a proper investigation of the living conditions. So that was probably one of the first things. And then going on from that, we were supposed to have mediation. And it actually got postponed, like, 3 or 4 times. So, yeah, I guess at that point in time, we were just feeling like we were getting thrown around. And it was always like we'd email in, speak to them, and be like, yeah, we'd have mediation. And then it would be like whatever we said to Riot, all of a sudden, Tainted Minds would be really quickly trying to resolve. So up until, yeah, we started contacting Riot, Tainted Minds weren't actually, like, addressing any of the issues. So in the ruling, it says, oh, we see that Tainted Minds have really tried and put effort into resolve the issues and all of this, whereas, like, I think that's a joke. I think the entirety of December, not a lot was done at all in terms of trying to resolve the issues that we were constantly, like, bringing forward. Yeah, they only ever started, like, really acting about it when we started contacting Riot. So we would say, hey, we've got these issues. Riot would be like, okay, cool. Like, we're going to do this about it. And then the next day or the day after, Tainted Minds would be, like, really, really working quick to get those things resolved before we went and were able to speak to Riot. So there was obviously some kind of a communication happening behind our contact with Riot, yeah, that made Tainted Minds automatically start jumping to do things. But yeah, like, mediation got postponed like 3 or 4 times. So it got postponed because the first time they were saying that, you know, the org owners had to be there in person in the room with the mediation, which I think is, like, really bizarre as well. Like, we live in an era where they can come in via a Skype call. So the owners were in Brisbane. So essentially, Tainted Minds had the opportunity to postpone it by saying, oh, sorry, look, we can't make it. Bad luck. So the first one got postponed, and then the second one got organised, and then Riot turned around a few days before saying, oh, that's a public holiday. We'll have to postpone it again. So then another weekend passed, and we had end up on, like, the next day, and then it was like, oh, sorry, Daniel Ringland has to take a personal day. So it got postponed again, and then we finally had the mediation. But at that time, it was like a week to 2 weeks before we even had the mediation. And yeah, Tainted Minds the whole time were in this 2-week period, like, rushing to try and resolve all of the issues. So it just kind of felt like they were given, like, time to fix their issues. So by the time we got in to actually speak to Riot and put our, like, points forward about this organization and how they were failing, like, they had the opportunity to be like, yeah, no, look, that's resolved. We're going to put that in the past. Whereas, like, that's not okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then for the past couple, specifically, you know, this announcement came out with this ruling, and I think there was an impression that, you know, like, the conversation, especially because of the Reddit post and the Twitlongers and all that different stuff, it had kind of expanded out to a bigger conversation and maybe a bigger investigation, especially around, you know, and we don't need to spend too much time on this, but the allegations that there was, you know, like, a conflict of interest within Riot around the stuff. What has the last couple of weeks been like, and how do you feel like Riot handled, you know, the most recent aspects of the investigation leading up to this ruling that came out a couple days ago?
Yeah, so I guess towards the end of our, like, communications with Riot OS, we actually got connected with lawyers from NA, which was really good, and they put forward that we should maybe go to an arbitration, I think it's called, I'm not sure. But we were all looking to go forward with that. The players, myself, the coach, we were happy to pay the expenses and everything, and Tainted Minds actually knocked it back. They said, no, we're not willing to pay that amount of money. So they put the hindrance there, which then made us go, well, what are our options? Like, they're not looking to resolve these issues. They're, like, literally trying to stop us in every possible way that we can resolve this within our NDA and, you know, nice behind doors, like the original way that we wanted to do it. So at that point did we start, releasing stuff and seeking help from, I guess, media. And that's how it got to the front page of Reddit. And it happened, like, a few times that we got to the front page of Reddit with stuff that we were trying to release. And only because of that did LOL Esports then say that they were going to do an investigation of the entire matter. So that was, I guess, ideally what we had wanted, because we had exhausted all of our other options. But yeah, so the investigation, I felt like, I only had one interview with a writer, but I felt like from my point of view with that interview, I got to say a lot of what I felt and really explain a lot of what had happened. I had a 2-hour call with this guy, and I left it feeling really good. And it's just a real disappointment to see that most of the stuff that I actually expressed and shared kind of got looked over. Like, the ruling was, I think, very, very, very minimal. Yeah.
And I don't ask you to speak for any of the players, but do you have any insight into how the investigation went from the player perspective as well, that bigger investigation with the broader LoL Esports team?
No, the only thing that I know of is that, you know, they were asked to have a Skype interview as well, like I did. I'm not sure which ones decided to go ahead with it. I think I know Ryan and Tristan did, but they opted to go via email instead of a Skype call because they wanted to have proof of, you know, what they had sent in and what questions they were asked. Yeah. Which Riot made it sound like they refused to have a Skype call, which, like, or they refused to try and help with the investigation, which I think isn't fair. But yeah, aside from that, I'm not sure like how they felt about, you know, the investigation and stuff that happened. I think it took a really long time, considering, you know, they were like, we'll give you an update next week about this. We're going to investigate it, and we only heard an update within like 3 weeks. So I'm not sure if it was just that much that they had to go through, but considering like how like limited, I guess, the ruling was, like, I don't know. And
finally, the verdict came out. What was your impression of the verdict and the ruling and all that? As you mentioned, it sounded like you were displeased with it.
Yeah, it just didn't touch a lot of things that I feel like they should have at least addressed. Yeah, I feel like it was, yeah, a huge like under-ruling, I guess. Like, it just did not meet the mark at all. And yeah, like, I think the total amount was, what, 7K?
Yeah.
That's not even the price of the 2 computers that they got fined. Like, one of the rulings was like they didn't provide the coach and the manager with computers. And like, the ruling doesn't even cover the amount of money they should have spent to provide us with those computers. Like, if that doesn't say it enough, like, yeah, I'm just very confused with how they came to that price or the ruling of it. I think that trying to look at it objectively, I think they may have tried to make the ruling fit within the amount of money that's in the region, so that, you know, they're not completely like screwing over the ecosystem within the region. But like, I personally think that they should have been banned. They could have just banned them, I guess. Like, I don't understand. Yeah. It's still very confusing to me, like, how they came up with the prices and what they were and weren't going to address within their ruling.
Yeah. Conversely, did you get a chance to see the Origin ruling that came out recently as well, just like on the heels of the Tainted Minds ruling?
Yeah, I did. How they were fined for not even having contracts.
Right.
Yeah.
What was your impression of the ruling for Origin versus the ruling that came across for Tainted Minds?
It seems like they got, a harsher ruling for less than what happened with us as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be, I'm not sure whether it was because, you know, Riot NA didn't investigate, you know, that region's ruling. Like, obviously, I don't think NA can really investigate every single region's rulings and what they do. Like, they should have faith within the teams of those regions to do it for their regions. But yeah, it just doesn't look like their, like, rulings are a global thing. They might just be region-based. Yeah. So they base the rulings off regions. But yeah, I don't know, like, the fact that I think, like, the issue of, like, Tainted Minds still owing me money wasn't addressed, I feel is, like, the biggest, like, kick in the stomach for me. I think that they say that, you know, managers aren't really a part of what Riot rule within the region and stuff, but they were happy to make a ruling about them not providing me with a computer. So, like, where do they get to pick apart, like, contracts to say, yeah, we can enforce this, but we're not going to enforce that? Like, if it was a player and they hadn't been paid for 2 months, the organization would just be banned. So what's the difference between a manager and a player?
Yeah. For you, are you planning on pursuing any kind of legal action against Tainted Minds? Because it seems like if you're unsatisfied with the Riot ruling, then the only option you really have is to pursue this in a more, government situation.
Yep, I was always looking to do that for my behalf, but at the point in time, the players' situation was far more important to me because they were actually stuck in like an illegal situation where they were unable to find work within their field of, trade. So the whole global database thing put them in a position where they could not find more work. So we were actually sitting with the players in a house. We were hoping for things to be resolved quickly, but like they were like having to pay for food, like rent and travel and all of this for the whole like 3-4 weeks with no income. So to me, addressing my stuff didn't make sense at that point in time. And it still doesn't until it's resolved, because in my mind, it's taking away from, stuff being resolved with them. And that was not my intention. So I do have like intent to, start to go and look to claim damages and that kind of thing. But, at that point in time, it was more about, helping find the lawyer and paying for the lawyer and like any way that I could support the players in the situation that they were in at that point in time and not distract from, Riot and everything else that they had to do.
To your knowledge, especially given the timelines that it took to resolve all this and sort of the inconvenience that the players had to go through during this time, was Riot at all apologetic to the players or to you or anyone involved in this stuff for the timeline that it took? Or, it seems like eventually they did realize there was an issue because at the very least they did fine the team and put it on probation, or the organization and put them on probation. Did they, was there any kind of apology from Riot to you guys or anything like that?
Not to me, no, at all, actually, which is a really good question because I'd never considered it. But no, there was never an apology, at least to me. I can't speak for the players or anyone else, but there was never really any essence of sorry.
Yeah. Finally, I'll just say, I remember meeting you a long time ago whenever I visited Australia. At the time, you seemed like a very big fan of Riot Games and League of Legends, and certainly I think your interest in creating this team and bringing it all together, following all this that has transpired, sort of what is your sentiment and feeling towards League of Legends esports and League of Legends and Riot Games and all that?
Yeah, obviously it's been like a pretty painful experience for me going through all of this and thinking that, Riot would help out and, obviously having it not really go in that way for me. And, it's been a huge blow, but like in the end, I just really hope that, we can, move forward from this and try and make the region still a better place. And we can learn from this. And, ideally, I still think that Tainted Minds should be banned as an organization. They're not meeting the mark with providing professionalism within the industry. They still have the wrong mindset going forward within esports in Australia. It's not an organization you want to have. They're not pushing forward for a pro scene, essentially, which I think is bad and will stop the growth of, the region. Do
you personally plan to continue to work within the League of Legends esports scene?
I would have loved to, but I don't think it's an option for me anymore. I haven't received any offers since being terminated. They've tried to damage my reputation within the region, and I'm kind of exiled at this point from Riot. Nobody from Riot will speak to me anymore, whereas I used to have really good communication with them, and they thought that I was the best manager within the region, and it's all kind of like flipped. So in terms of me finding another job within the region, I don't think that's going to happen based off the fact that the top teams already have their management sorted out. I'm not really interested in working for a bottom tier team if they're not going to be working at the same level of interest and passion that I have. Like there's no sense in me going to work for a team with players who aren't going to perform at least my level of passion, if not higher. Preferably I would like to be within a team that are performing at a higher level so that I can continue to grow as well and be in an environment where, I can be passionate about what I'm doing. But I don't feel like that option's available for me.
Fasffy, at the end of this interview here, is there anything that you would like to say to any of the League of Legends esports fans or anybody out there just about the topic or anything else?
Yeah. I just want to I guess say don't lose faith and hope. I know that this has created a huge situation where people are quite angry about what's happened, and they're starting to feel pretty involved in the ruling and feel like they want to be heard from it. But yeah, I guess it's just hoping that they'll still continue to support the Oceanic region as a whole, because it is a great region, and with the right support, the players that we have within the region could be fantastic overseas, and we could really perform well. It's just we've always lacked the support, which is, I guess, what you see here with this instance as well. It's just a lack of support, whether it's a lack of a coach, lack of a good management, lack of an organisation that's holding up their part of the contracts and that kind of thing. Yeah, just still continue to support the region, because there are some really great players here.
Fasffy, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and have this call with me and to sort of explain your side of the scenario. Certainly seems like there are still some questions unanswered, and would love to hear some more of that, maybe from the other side in the future. But thank you so much for taking your time here today. For everyone else, you can check out the rest of our coverage of all things esports here at Yahoo Esports.